This reading from the book of Genesis describes one of history's turning points. Abram obeyed the divine promptings, and the result was the Bible's whole story and the influence of Christianity on this earlier history. Beginning at chapter 12, verse 1, a reading from the book of Genesis. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and in the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife, Sarai, and his brother's son, Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abraham journeyed on by stages towards the Negev. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. When I was 29 years old and the mother of a beautiful, rambunctious toddler, my then husband received a call to leave his country and kindred and the house on Linden Street in Wellesley, Massachusetts, to travel to a new land. By which I mean a very nice offer from a particular university that wanted him to join their PhD program. This involved leaving the Boston area where we'd gone to college and lived for a total of 12 years, as well as going from the place where all our friends were, to Binghamton, where we knew exactly no one. And so he did. We did. We left that little Cape Cod house near the commuter rail and traveled along Interstate 90 and then Interstate 88 to the small but pretty cool city that would be his home for the next 20 years or so, even more for me. We brought with us our son and all the possessions we had amassed in Massachusetts. I regret to inform you that there are still boxes in my attic from the move from Wellesley to New York, which have not been opened. And you know, it felt like a big deal to us, but especially to me, because I was actually in the middle of my own graduate program in Boston, at Boston College, in pastoral ministry. But that's what you do when you're committed to your partner and your family. You get up and you go. People have left homes and traveled much further and under far more challenging circumstances than we did. Anyone here grow up as the child of an active duty military officer? So, you know what I'm talking about. You probably moved more than once. The life of a military brat, so-called, which is a terrible name to call someone just because their mom or dad is serving the nation in a profession that is not only difficult and dangerous, but is also not terribly wonderfully compensated. I have a friend who relocated to New Zealand this year, leaving her work as an Ivy League chaplain because her husband couldn't turn down an academic job. It was just too good an offer. They took with them 2 small children. And then there are families who relocate not because one member has a work opportunity or commitment, but because they are in danger and they need to run because bombs have destroyed their homes, their neighborhood, their city. All things considered, moving to Binghamton was a good thing for me in both the short and long run. I found my life here, absolutely not in the way that I expected. But to find that life, I had to let another life go. Abram receives a call from God to get up and go from his father's house and his land and everything and almost everyone he knows, to travel to a new land, a land that God will show him. This seems like a good time to mention that God does not provide Abraham with a roadmap. God says the equivalent of, "I'll let you know when you get there," which sounds thoroughly unnerving and strange, and maybe even a little upsetting. I mean, if God told you to get up and go, only wasn't terribly specific about whether you should hop on I-88 East or Route 17 West or I-81 North or South, what would you do? That would be a challenge. This also seems like a good time to mention that get up and go is not the only thing God said to Abram. God made Abram 3 promises. God promised land that God would show Abram. This would be his land and the land of his descendants. And speaking of descendants, God promised children. "I will make of you a great nation," said God. And that means that Abraham would have descendants who would be so numerous they would effectively become their own country. And God promised blessing. "I will bless you," said God, "and I will make your name great so that you will be a blessing." Land, children, blessing. This seems like a good time to mention the fact that Abram was 75 years old when God said, "Get up and go." Now, later on, we'll find out that Sarai, his wife, is about 10 years younger than Abram, so she's about 65 years old. And 65 is the new 45. I get that. But you may have noticed that the reported ages of various characters in the book of Genesis are pretty large and mythic. Methuselah lived 900 years, George Gershwin wrote in his jazz opera, Porgy and Bess. Also, Noah lived more than 900 years, though he built the ark when he was a spry 600. So for Abram and Sarai to be 75 and 65, who knows? Maybe in this era, they're still sprightly young things. Maybe the promise of children at this point is not outrageously improbable. Maybe it's only later, when they're nearing triple digits, that childbearing becomes truly unlikely, especially for the mother. But for now, this is a threefold promise. And the way to receive the promise is to let go of the past. Should be a piece of cake, right? Oh, if only. Some of us are good at letting go of things like material possessions. Some are good at letting go of those things that keep us from attaining our heart's desire. Some are even good at letting go of their self-interest for the sake of others. For the rest of us, the way of letting go can be a challenge. A few years ago, a tiny book by Marie Kondo started flying off the shelves all over the world. It was called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up: The Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing. Everywhere there were testimonials by people who claimed their lives were indeed changed by adhering to Ms. Kondo's system. It even made its way onto the plotline of the rebooted Gilmore Girls this past fall. For those of us who are any Gilmore Girls people in the room? Anybody? I'm the only one? In which Lorelai walks into the Gilmore family manse to see her usually elegant mother, who's usually in something like a Castleberry or a Chanel suit, standing there in t-shirt and ripped jeans, picking up items one by one to see whether they give her joy, and then throwing them in a bin, because at that point, nothing gives her joy. This sort of thing doesn't come naturally to everyone, which is why Ms. Kondo has a 3-month waiting list for her services in Tokyo, where she lives. It can be hard letting go of the people and the things and the life that we hold dear. But letting go, when it becomes clear that is what God is asking us to do, can also offer us the best chance of being open to what God has planned next for us. You're all aware that by now that the Labyrinth is set up in the fellowship hall each Sunday in March. The Labyrinth is a form of embodied prayer, a walking meditation. And as I mentioned last week, there are a number of resources, sheets that you can read to help you figure out how to walk the labyrinth if it's something you've never done before. But one of the simplest ways to walk the labyrinth also happens to be one that is very connected to what we are talking about right now. You can walk the labyrinth as a prayer that is designed to help you let go. So you stand at the entrance of the labyrinth. You say a prayer asking God to help you to let go of whatever it is that you want to let go of. And then you begin to walk the labyrinth with that prayer held in your heart. You can even hold your hands in such a way that you are signaling that you are letting go. I usually hold my hands palm down. You might need to let go of resentment or anger or some other emotion that's troubling you. You might need to let go of a behavior or an action that is harming you or others. You might need to let go of a phase in life that is coming to an end. And you walk and you let this intention guide you. Then when you get to the middle of the labyrinth, you say another prayer. And you ask God to give you what it is that God would like to fill you with instead. And if you want, you can change your hands into a posture of receiving. So I usually hold my hands palms up, like this, if you want to. And then you walk out of the labyrinth with that intention. And at the end, you pray a prayer of thanksgiving for whatever it is God has in store. The labyrinth, obviously, isn't the only way to pray for help in letting go or so that you can move on, but it's a useful one, and it's one that's available right now. And we can pray not only with our hearts, but with our bodies, which can be a different experience. Abram and Sarai show their willingness to let go of the past and whatever hopes and dreams they had associated with their old life by getting up and going without hesitation into the future that God has planned for them. We might not be as sure as they are or were, at least not as quickly as they were, but they were persuaded that God had a real future in store for them. What future do we see that God has in store for us? And how can we prepare for that future? Not by devaluing the beauty of the life we already have, not by ghosting our way out of relationships that nurture us, but by beginning to wonder just two things. First, what are the things God might gently be nudging us to let go? And second, how can we open ourselves? Hands, minds, hearts. To learn not only what it is that we need to let go of, but what it is that we can anticipate, what we can look forward to with trust and joy. Thanks be to God. Amen.